I'm here with Dr. James Sears, editor of Your Ward News and leader of the NCP, the New Constitution Party. James,
Yep.
there's been a lot of controversy since you've taken over as editor of Your Ward News. Let me start with the obvious questions first. Are you a racist? Do you hate Jews?
Well, those are two separate questions. First of all, I don't hate anybody, okay? I've got nothing against anybody. The term racist, the definition's changed over the years. A racist used to be somebody who thought the races were different, okay? In the same way a sexist thinks the sexes are different. The definition now is that a racist is someone who hates other races. I don't hate anybody. But I do think the races and religions and people are all different, and I think we should celebrate our differences instead of trying to conform and all be the same, which is the Marxist utopia that is a total delusion.
Now, Your Ward News has always been somewhat anti-left and anti-Marxist.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that Marxism is on the rise in Canada?
Marxism has been on the rise in Western society for decades. If you watch the movie The Manchurian Candidate, you'll know that in that movie the United States was infiltrated because they had a candidate who was running for office that was basically programmed. There's a lot of Marxist programming taking place in schools right now. Anybody going to university has been programmed by Marxism. I've even heard ridiculous comments from young people saying, well, Marxists are all smart or they're all intellectuals. Whereas if you're not a Marxist, you're not. This is a brainwashed attitude, and there's been a rise of it. It occurred when, in the Soviet Union, back in the early 20th century, Bolshevik Jews who created Marxism took over. Then there was a purge that took place in the Soviet Union where a lot of Christians started taking over communism, and that slowly led to communism falling. But those Marxist Jews eventually came to North America and set up Marxism here, and they call themselves neocons, but they're actually Marxists. If you look at all these American neocons, they are Marxist, and they have a Marxist worldview, and they eventually want to set up one world government, and that's what I'm against. And when I met Leroy, the publisher of the newspaper, I was a fan. The newspaper was very anti-Marxist to begin with, but slightly misguided and slightly, how should I put it? It didn't have a lot of focus. What I've tried to do is bring up the stature of the paper, give it a little more focus, have better grammar, better spelling, more targeted articles with better research. And what's occurred is that the community now, there's been a schism in the community. There are those in the community who say, oh my God, this is incredible. This guy's testing the boundaries of free speech. He's saying what a lot of us are thinking, and we don't agree with everything he says, but he's a necessary evil, quote unquote. Then there's that other segment, which is in the minority, but they're a very vocal minority, that says that we're evil. We are quote-unquote Nazis. They love to throw around that term. We are racist, we are anti-Semites, we are homophobes, we are sexist, we are misogynists. They throw all these terms out, and they're trying very hard to shut us down. And this is very typical of the left. Right-wing people are very proud of the free speech and the exercise of free speech, even on the left side. The left does not want any exercise of free speech other than their own. And that's the difference. I love it when commies are protesting. I love it when, these socialist, Marxist, anarchist protest. I think they're misguided. I think the anarchists should be minarchists like I am. But it's part of a free and open society. Whereas if I so much as speak about something they don't agree with, like, for example, I'm against abortion. I think it's murder. Well, I can't have an opinion on it. I'm automatically a misogynist and a sexist. I automatically hate women if I'm against abortion. Well, that's just ridiculous, and it's very unidimensional, it's very close-minded, and I think these people have better lighten up. I mean, they just sprayed graffiti.
Well, the left has gone through great lengths to try and shut this publication down. We've seen it with the unionized workers at Canada Post filing complaint after complaint to try and persuade Canada Post not to take your business and deliver this paper. And recently the office where we are right now was vandalized with the words Nazi fuck written across the window. Do you think that this was a random act by a graffiti artist, or do you believe that this was actually just another salvo from the left in trying to close this publication down?
Yeah, well, it's definitely targeted. I mean, from the wording of it, it had a word at the beginning of it that was, we couldn't make out. It looked like sherm or charm or something, and the words Nazi fuck. And we're going to be having a contest in the next issue, and we want people to guess what that first word is. And the best guess, the one that we think is the coolest guess, will get dinner with me at a nice restaurant in the local area, or we could chit-chat about politics or whatever else they want to ask me. Yes, it's a targeted attack. Everything the left does is targeted. The NDP is in bed with the unions, and the NDP does not like us. Their leader, their present leader, Thomas Mulcair, is extremely sleazy, and he's not a very honest person. And we're going to be writing an article about him in the next issue. The people at Canada Post attempted twice to send our materials to hate speech lawyers, and both times lawyers cleared it and said this isn't hate speech. More recently, one of their workers claimed that our newspaper had some special ink that no other newspaper has, and she got a rash on her hand. That held up our paper for a few more days while doctors reviewed the rash, and doctors came to the conclusion that indeed it wasn't related to the newspaper. We don't know what they're going to do next. I went to 10 Gower Street, which is an apartment that receives our newspaper, but it hasn't been coming. The mailman is adamant he's delivering it. But I interviewed residents, and it turns out a whole building is being missed. He may be putting a few newspapers in the slots of the management to make it appear he's delivering, but he isn't. So there are odd instances. In general, the mailmen have been good. In general, even though they don't like our newspaper, they're doing the honorable thing and they're delivering it. But there's the odd mailman here and there that is exercising what I call discretion that is illegal, and
So
lose their jobs for it.
There's also been a case of the Ontario government holding a news conference just up the street from this office that this paper wasn't informed of, where they gave $500,000 of taxpayers' money to police agencies that deal in hate crime and mentioned this paper by name.
Yeah.
Now that to me, that's a targeted incident from the government to quash free speech or freedom of the press that is critical of the way this government operates in Ontario. Have you talked to any lawyers or sent any letters to the government concerning that?
You know what? I don't bother with that for the simple reason that every time they attack, I turn it around. It would be equivalent to the Israelis, the Zionists launching a missile at Palestine and blowing up, an empty shell being left, and the Palestinians turning the missile into a flower pot. I did the same thing with the graffiti. I'm turning it into a contest. Guess the graffiti. What happened up the street? We wrote an article about it where we mocked them. I am not going to violate their rights to freedom of expression. The government has a right. Now, they did steal $500,000 of taxpayer money. It was exactly $449,000. And it's being sent to a very mysterious agency. I think it's hceit.com or something along those lines. I think that's the website. And they mentioned our newspaper, and they mentioned it committing heinous acts. Heinous. And, us publishing a newspaper which is maybe a little bit politically incorrect is not heinous. I mean, a person beats up someone because of the color of their skin, that's heinous. The Israelis bomb the Palestinians and the Palestinian children are killed on a beach. That's heinous. Publishing a newspaper that's politically incorrect is not heinous. And that word is a very inappropriate word to use. And all they're doing is they're trying to rile people up, and they're trying to get the government to give money to their cronies. I'm convinced that whoever runs this hate crime unit is in bed with the Liberal Party.
And will this paper continue in the future along the same track of criticizing the political left in this country? And will you continue to carry on the way you have, even though there's been opposition to this publication?
We're going to carry on as we have. The only thing that I'm looking at doing is, because we've had a lot of support, is expanding the area that the newspaper covers to eventually all of Toronto. This is what we're looking at doing to start. Then we're also looking at expanding the size of the paper, because I find that every month so much shit happens that I want to report and I can't, because, for example, Canada Post attacks us. Well, the September issue, half of it is going to talk about the Canada Post attacks and this graffiti, and there are other world issues that I can't cover in 16 pages. So what I'm going to have to do for maybe next year, after the election's over, is expand the newspaper to perhaps 24 pages so we can get in everything that we want. And I'm going to have to hire another person for editing and get a bit more input from writers. And by the way, we've asked the left if they want to contribute articles to the paper, and they refuse to. They don't want to contribute anything because they don't speak intelligently.
Okay, and finally, would you like to make a statement about anything else, and maybe talk briefly about your candidacy in the upcoming election?
Well, the only thing I'd like to say is that I'm going to be running as an independent in the Beaches East York riding. I, of course, am not happy with any of the political parties. I founded a party called the New Constitution Party. The website's ncparty.ca. You can go there and look at my platform, learn about me. However, it's not a registered federal party yet. I didn't want to register it before this election because there's too many restrictions. After the election's over, early next year, January, February, I'm going to take the 250 signatures necessary to register it, and I will be registering it with the federal government so it can appear on the ballot. This year, for this election, because it's short time, I'm going to be running as an independent. But before I make that decision, I need 100 signatures. I've already collected the majority of signatures, but I want to submit at least 150 signatures for the simple reason that people, every step of the way, people have thrown roadblocks in front of me and in front of Leroy, the publisher of the paper, and I would not be surprised if somebody within the government who is a person that's sympathetic to the NDP or the Liberals might try to throw a roadblock in place, or might try to reject a lot of my signatures because there might be a slight spelling error. An apartment suite may be blurrily written on the nomination paper. So I want to make sure I submit 150 signatures. I'm going to get them in by, I'm saying, around August 31st. And if everything goes well, I should be officially nominated by September 1st, and I will appear on the ballot as James Sears, independent candidate, and I hope that people vote for me. I know a lot will.
Okay, thank you very much, James, and good luck in the upcoming election.
No problem at all. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I appreciate it.
You have 2 saved messages. First saved message.
This is the one, huh?
Hey Leroy, it's Ermina.
That's just
Hope
a
you're
nice
well, my
girl.
friend. Anyway, our family member is breathing on his phone again as of last night. So I'm around.
That's
give me a
Ermina.
call when you're back in.
Well, I know that.
Ermina, she's a Greek woman.
Yeah?
She's really a beautiful person.
Okay.
Yeah?
Hey.
You've met her, or you've talked
Yeah, I
to her?
met her. Yeah.
So, Ermina, bye.
Okay.
And this is the one for me.
Now, here, this one here is for you, I think.
Hi, Jimmy.
Yeah,
This
it's
is,
for you.
Jimmy here. You might be the biggest fool I've ever met. I've never heard about in my entire life. Honest to God, you're the biggest fool, the biggest retard. You're unbelievably stupid. If I get in my mailbox one more of your newsletters, I will personally come down and shove it down your throat.
Whoa, this guy's bad to the bone.
To erase this message,
Wow.
press 7.
Yeah.
Save it, press
Oh,
9.
you're definitely gonna save it, right?